So I guess my journey is maybe, yeah, my journey is maybe not the most typical. I've always been interested in computers. Like the first memory of, well, I grew up in Korea up until third grade, and everyone plays StarCraft. So I'm like, yeah, I like computers. Um, but so and then my family moved to the States, and back in the States, we were friends with this other family that was moving back to Korea, and they gifted me their computer, their old computer. But they wiped the disk, and so it just didn't have any operating systems on it. And because of this, I happened to find out about Ubuntu, and that was my first ventures into like Linux world and command lines. So I've been dabbling ever since that. But I specifically became interested in open source developments more towards like 2017, and this was when I was finding out about Bitcoin. My name is Calvin Kim. I work on protocol developments in the Bitcoin scene, and the project that I specifically work on is something called Utreexo, which is a hash-based accumulator for the Bitcoin's UTXO set. And I've been mainly developing that. And last July, we put out the draft BIPs for for the Utreexo protocol. So that's usually what I do, or that's mostly what I do.
And what would you say has been your biggest contribution thus far to Bitcoin, the Bitcoin protocol, in your career?
Well, of course, the to the Bitcoin protocol itself, the Utreexo BIPs would be my greatest contributions. There's some other contribution that I've been specifically proud of, which was back in 2021. Using the Utreexo accumulators, I showed that hey, you could do parallel block validation. Unfortunately, that didn't take off back in 2021. It's starting like people are thinking more about it nowadays, but yeah, so that's something that I'm specifically proud of.
Let's take a little bit of a step back. So, can you give the 101 on Utreexos? Like, break down what you had mentioned right now about it being like a hash-based accumulator. Like, what does that mean?
So yeah, for I guess for Ethereum devs, they might be. I think they should somewhat be aware of like RSA accumulators. Some variants of RSA accumulators would be like the Virtual trees that popped up a few years ago, and like these accumulators, Utreexo is also a type of an accumulator. Uh, Except that it uses hashes instead of like the what RSA is doing. And so there's pros and cons of doing this. If you do hashes, the proof sizes are specifically bigger, but the actual calculations are much faster because like modern computers can do hashes very quickly. So um, uh, well, okay, so that I explained it like that. But if we take even more of a step back, then an accumulator is just a way to uh, keep a set. Like it specifically in terms of Bitcoin, we have these UTXOs, and the UTXOs are the Bitcoins that are available to be spent. And we have a big database of this UTXOs, and we call that like the UTXO set. In Bitcoin core terms, like that would be the chain state. You have to have this if you want to validate new blocks. And uh, currently we keep this in level DB, but with Utreexo, what we do is instead of keeping this in level DB, we create this. It's basically a variant of Merkle trees. We make this Merkle tree thing, and because it's a Merkle tree, the end state is very tiny, and we just keep that. And along with the block, we receive proofs to validate all the inputs in that block. So the advantage here is that the states that you keep is much, much smaller. And because it's smaller, it could fit into places where it didn't fit in before. Like one cool thing, one of the guys I was working on, it was like a day or two ago. He compiled it for his router, like a router at home, and so that was cool to see. Like, hey, there's a Bitcoin node running on there. So there's that, but then there's also performance gains just because of the fact that we don't have the disk reads and writes anymore, and replace those with hashes. And so there's benefits like this, and so this is why more or less the Bitcoin developers have been like very positive to the Utreexo protocol. So
That makes a lot of sense. And it's also very exciting because from what you were sharing, it sounds as though this could potentially make Bitcoin more decentralized. More people could potentially be able to run nodes, and running nodes could become a lot more efficient. Um, it sounds as though that's a pretty big change to the way that the state is
yes,
stored, and the way that it's handled in a node. I'm pretty surprised that this doesn't require any kind of a hard fork or a soft fork. In the Ethereum world, if I mean changing consensus rules is commonplace. You know, that protocol changes all the time. But as I understand, Utreexo doesn't require any protocol level changes. Is that correct?
yes. Well, the original author of this is Taj Raja, who is known for, actually, who's known also for his like Ethereum contributions. He didn't contribute to it directly, but his main contribution is the Lightning Network. But well, when Ethereum was on like proof of work based like hashes, um, the ETH hash was based off of one of his hash algorithms. That was one of the first things that he put out, and like I recall that one of the reasons why Ethereum hashing needed so much memory is because of what he came up with. But anyway, that's besides the point. But yeah, but yeah. Um, so the deployment itself would be a lot easier if we did a soft fork. There is definitely a soft fork way of deploying Utreexo. When we started development, uh, we were very, very scared of proposing softworks because that's just the thing. It's just
What
it's a bit of politics, and so like developers, we don't like politics. Like I personally don't enjoy doing those things, and so we didn't even want to deal with that, and so there's a different way of doing this without doing a soft fork, and this way requires a special type of nodes called bridge nodes, which help bridge the network between these non-Utreexo nodes and Utreexo nodes. And this is essentially the way we do it without a soft fork.
is that available now? Is that happening now? The bridge nodes are there. Anyone who wants to use your tree exos can do so now, or is that just an idea?
We have implements and we are running these bridge nodes, except that like anyone is able to currently run Utreexo nodes. We strongly encourage them to not run Utreexo nodes because right now it's not quite ready, and we're still doing a lot of protocol changes. Um, I'll get to that in a bit. Like we had a very major protocol change, like just uh like just now, and like it just like late last year. So like all these changes are happening, and if a user wants to keep using their Utreexo nodes, they will have to constantly update. And maybe that's okay for some people, but usually the general expectation for Bitcoin node runners is that, hey, like you just download it and you keep it running. And usually you don't have to do things to it. So we can't really meet that expectation right now. And so that's why we were just, hey, like this is very beta. If you know what you're getting into, then yes. But for the moment, just stay put.
You are working on making allowing people to run their own Utreexo nodes in a production grade ready way. Like you said, it's in beta now. But as you mentioned, there's also three Bitcoin improvement proposals that were
Yes.
shared when I first reached out to you about actually making this done via hard fork. Sorry, not a hard fork. I'm on Ethereum mindset, done via a soft fork, which sounds as though you and your team have gotten into the politics of initiating this idea. How committed are you guys to getting these BIPs activated and implemented via soft fork? Like, what's the plan? What's going on with the BIP proposals?
With the BIP proposals, it's just a lot of editing, and specifically with the last BIP, which is BIP 183, and that deals with the P2P protocol changes. We've been trying to finalize that, and we've been having protocol changes there. So uh, editing is happening, and so that's what we're currently stuck on. But I do want to say that maybe I said it on a tweet or something, but the BIPs themselves specifically mentioned that we do not need a soft fork. So,
I see.
and I was saying, and there's some people that are like that get worried saying like, hey, like because these Utreexo nodes depend on these bridge nodes, isn't this a problem for the Bitcoin network in general? Like, wouldn't this create a different like segments in the Bitcoin node network? And what I keep saying is that if the Utreexo node runners get big enough that if the segmentation becomes a problem, then yeah, we should do a soft fork. But so that's what I keep saying. It's like, hey, we don't like it's just I don't we don't want to propose any forks, so that's why we're doing this bridge node way. But if like I don't know, if push comes to shove and like we have this big problem, then yes, we of course we can do a soft fork to like not have these segmentations in the Bitcoin network.
I think that's actually a really smart way to go about the politics of the soft fork because it's almost as if you're saying, look, if we get enough of the Bitcoin network agreeing and using and having consensus that Utreexo is a good idea, then that is, if and when that happens, that is when it becomes clear. Everyone wants the Utreexo soft fork, but before then, people can still utilize and take the benefits of this feature. Wow, you guys have really made this feature as flexible as possible, where in either case, it just sounds like a win-win outcome, which in the context of Bitcoin protocol development, I feel like that's a very rare thing to do for a Bitcoin improvement proposal.
We put a lot of thought into put a lot of thought into this.
How, when was this Utreexo's project? When did you join this Utreexo's project?
It's been a while for me. It originally started out as a paper by Taj, and I think he put out the paper back in 2018. Taj came to Seoul. He was actually invited to talk at a conference, the Biddle Asia conference, which I think is more geared towards the Ethereum developers.
I
And
was at Biddle Asia this
oh, you
past
were at
year.
Biddle Asia.
Were you there in
Okay, so
2025?
I
Last year?
I was not there in 2025. I didn't know it was happening, but
Oh
was
man.
it in Seoul? It's
Yes,
because
it
the Biddle.
was.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm okay. I was completely unaware of it. But okay. Wow, okay, you were there. Okay, so it's the same conference, but back in 2019. And so he was invited to speak at the conference. And I was so how I got started into Bitcoin is with through the Seoul Bitcoin meetup. And the Seoul Bitcoin meetup started back in 2014 by Ruben, no, 2013 or 14 by Ruben Thompson, um, who's also sort of like engaged in sort of different Ethereum topics. His project, like State Chains, which was one of his first contributions, I think is was very similar to Plasma Cash that was proposed at the time. But anyways, yeah. So I began my sort of the Bitcoin journey at the Seoul Bitcoin meetup back in 2017, and we've invited Taj over for the meetup since he was in town anyways. And the thing that he came to the conference to speak about was Utreexo, and he was sort of talking about different design changes that we could do. It's like, hey, like if we do it this way, we have these trade-offs. If we do it this other way, we have the separate trade-offs, and um, lots of designing, implementing was going on, and he basically just said, "Hey, like I'm just basically working on this alone, and so if anyone wants to join, I'd be happy to join. Like just happy to like accept new contributors." So that sort of motivated me, and I got into the project very early on. So yeah, I've started uh, digging at the protocol and the accumulator library itself. Then we developed the accumulator library enough for it to be integrated into a Bitcoin node. And after the integration of Bitcoin nodes, after the integration into that, we had to make sure all the features that a normal Bitcoin node performs have like they worked. All those features worked, and so that took a while. And in the midst of that, we also had this accumulator design change because we found out that, hey, like the current design that was written up in the Utreexo paper itself, that wasn't, that could be better. That could be more efficient. So we had this change, and um, after all these years, now we have these bips out. So that's that's been my journey. It took a while to get from paper to like hey, like actual proposal.
And I mean, you guys are still, I mean, it's still a work in practice. I mean, 2017, and it's 2026, the year that we're recording this. This is a big
20,
chunk of
2019 when I started.
2019,
20,
sorry.
2017, yeah. Yeah.
Right, 2019. It, is it still primarily just you and Taj, or how big is the Utreexo team?
There were a bit of contributors that came and left. I guess one of the most prolific now would be like Nicholas. I forget his last, Nicholas Goiga. He's now a full-time Bitcoin Core contributor. He mostly deals with security and he does a lot of fuzzing tests. Um, so there are people that worked on it and then left, but um, now I think it was back in 2023. I was doing a lots of mentoring for Summer of Bitcoin, which is essentially the same idea as Summer of Code by Google, except that it's just focused solely on projects, open source projects within the Bitcoin ecosystem. So there, I mentored someone called Davidson Souza. He's now a full-fledged contributor to the Utreexo project, and through him, so he's based in Brazil, and so there's another place called Vintium, which is an organization in Brazil that's geared towards growing Bitcoin developers, in specifically in Brazil, and there's now a bunch of guys that are working on the project full time because of that. So it's me, Taj, Davidson that mostly work on the protocol itself, but there's another implementation called Floresta, and it's in Rust, and that project is specifically geared towards wallet developers. And it's just trying to make this node implementation as easy as possible to integrate into existing Bitcoin wallets. So for the Floresta project, there's quite a bit of people. And um, yeah, like I'm excited to see that, and we are so close to actually being like actually like having this like put out in the wild and having people use it. I am also very very close to finishing up the Utreexo Bips, so like one of the big goals for this year. I've been promising people since last year. I'm like, 2026, you could actually use it. Like we're very very close. You could actually use it. Um, so yeah, yeah, it's been beta for a while. But yeah, it's this year. This is the year. This is the year we get to actually use it.
And I feel honored that this is the year in which was able to speak to you, because it sounds from what you're saying that you guys are so close to the finish line in getting this project yeah, ready truly for wider use by Bitcoin node operators. And it's cool to hear about how over time, traction for this project has grown. Um, how is the project supported and like funded?
I guess when it's eventually ready, there's a lot of people there's a lot of companies and wallets that be interested in integrating it, but not specific companies working on it now, but lots of different organizations that are funding it. So it's a lot of just open source contributors. So like I talked about, like a lot of the contributors in Brazil. I think there's like at least 7 that are full time in Brazil now, and they are being funded by Vintium. A lot of them are being funded by Vintium, and for the other contributors, like myself, I am being funded by an organization called OpenSats, which is a organization specifically like made up to fund freedom technology, like open source technologies. Um, they're not specific to Bitcoin because they're also funding, oh shoot, I forget his name, but they're also funding the creator of WireGuard. So they're not Bitcoin specific, but anything that helps with Bitcoin, or like if it's in the stack for a lot of these different projects, they're willing to fund it. And like Utreexo project is one of the projects they're interested in, so I'm being funded that way. I think one other guy is also being funded by OpenSats. But yeah, at the moment, like Bitcoin protocol development, it's usually these different organizations.
And Calvin, when you first started contributing to Utreexos in 2019, were you already a full-time Bitcoin developer then, or when did you transition into working
Ah,
on Bitcoin full-time?
so back in 2019, I was still in school, so it worked out really well. So it's just the side project for me that I put a lot of time into it. So I worked on the Utreexo project as a passion project for about a year. And then in 2020, in the later half of 2020, I got funding by like the BitMEX, the trading platform founded by Arthur Hayes. So they were funding the Bitcoin developments from like 2020 to 2023. Yeah, if I remember correctly, there was a year where they lost a lot of customers, and so they had to like downsize the company by a lot, and they couldn't really justify this open source expenditure. So that's when everybody moved elsewhere. But yeah, so when I first got started, I was funded by BitMEX. Then I was funded by the Human Rights Foundation, the HRF. They're also based in New York. They have a separate fund called the Bitcoin Development Fund, and I was funded through that. And now I'm being funded by OpenSense,
This is so fascinating to me because in the Ethereum developer world, which I'm sorry, I keep bringing Ethereum into this, but in
which
the Ethereum
I would
develop
love to hear.
really? Oh, well,
Yeah,
let me tell you, I got so
yeah.
much for you. But in the Ethereum developer world, all the developers are funded by companies. Like they are company
Mhm.
employees of like Consensus, the Ethereum Foundation, I don't know, like Sigma Prime. There's these like blockchain infrastructure companies that uh, some even like protocols, like layer two protocols, they buy like Ethereum developer teams, and so
Oh,
many of
okay.
the people in governance, like when you're discussing like a proposal or an EIP, they're kind of representing like the company that they work for. But it sounds as though on the Bitcoin development side, and especially with your journey as a Bitcoin developer, you've just received like grants and almost like of a company. They do this out of like their own goodwill, like public goods. Like you're like a public good, like will help sustain like this open source development. Have you found that it's sustainable? Like, are you, uh, uh, do you feel like this is a sustainable thing for you to do to be a full-time Bitcoin developer? I'm impressed that, the
Yeah.
funding has,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like that's impressive. Is
Yeah.
it is it is it very like a lot of that happen? There's so many of it that in Bitcoin, it's a very robust public goods funding mechanism that you're not worried about in terms of how sustainable it is?
Specifically with BitMEX, they were very good about, they were always like, hey, we got your back. And even when they shut down, um, Johnny, who used to run the fund at BitMEX, he actually found me like a different organization. So he found me HRF, and they were willing to fund me, and so they were very good about that. But I guess when I was on the HRF grant, I did have this feeling like, hey, next year am I gonna be paid? So there is there is that lingering thought. And it used to be so for um, like back in 2018 or 2019, there weren't as much of this like goodwill funding happening. And like even before then, like if we go even further back, there weren't really these organizations funding, and used to be more focused, or well, more based on these companies. But I think it's like since 2022 or 2023 and onwards, the the funding pool has gotten big enough that now if I talk to different organizations, they're saying, hey, like we can't find people to fund. We have enough money.
Wow.
It's just that there's not enough good project proposals that needs to be funded. And so the the scene has definitely changed. I sort of feel that this is sustainable now. A few years back, not so much, but nowadays, the table has sort of flipped where I talked to some Bitcoin startups, and they're like, hey, we can't compete with these organizations that are that have this so much money, and they're able to fund like open source development, so we can't like hire people because we're not able to compete with them. But so that's a separate problem. I like this problem better, but yeah, I feel that it's pretty sustainable nowadays.
Um, Are you after this Utreexo project? Do you want to work for a company? Like, what are you thinking about in terms of next steps for how you want to progress in your Bitcoin development career?
I'm if there's a good opportunity, I'm always open, I guess, to uh going like some joining a company and then doing work in that sense. But I enjoy open source developments. I guess something that specifically interests me a lot is just performance. I get because one of the selling points for the Utreexo project was, hey, like we're able to have a lot of these performance gains, and if you want those performance gains, you really have to tune for them. So I've been really enjoying like performance tuning the Node software. So that's always something that ha- that's always something that's needed, and that's always something that I'm interested in. So I could always go that route. Um, One of the things that specifically was bugging me with Bitcoin stuff, well, specifically with Bitcoin wallets, is how wallets talk to the servers. So like Bitcoin wallets, if you start them up, like a lot of people think that, hey, if you start a Bitcoin wallet, you're starting a Bitcoin node, but it's just using this protocol called Electrum. And when you start up a wallet, it's completely trusting this server, and you're completely exposing all your addresses, your IP, like your balance, everything to all of these servers. And it's really bad for privacy reasons for the user itself, but it's really bad for the Bitcoin network itself because, hey, if we have a lot of these Bitcoin users that directly trust these servers and these companies and I don't know, these random people, uh, they're delegating their Bitcoin validation to them. And if we don't have enough validation, then hey, like maybe later down the road, the Bitcoin network won't be as secure because there's not as many people checking these rules. So, fixing up the Electrum protocol to something else has always been on my mind, and um, the 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 people that are working on Electrum was always like, "Hey, we need more people to work on this." So that's been something in my mind for quite a while, and I've been sort of putting that off because I wanted to work on these things. So that's like some of the things that I'm interested in.
What would you say like were skills that you had to pick up kind of like as you were doing the work of Bitcoin development and working on the Utreexo project versus what you had already perhaps like come into the role with?
So I guess my journey is maybe, yeah, my journey is maybe not the most typical. I've always been interested in computers. Like the first memory of, well, I grew up in Korea up until third grade, and everyone plays StarCraft. So I'm like, yeah, I like computers. Um, but so and then my family moved to the States, and back in the States, we were friends with this other family that was moving back to Korea, and they gifted me their computer, their old computer. But they wiped the disk, and so it just didn't have any operating systems on it. And because of this, I happened to find out about Ubuntu, and that was my first ventures into like Linux world and command lines. So I've been dabbling ever since that. But I specifically became interested in open source developments more towards like 2017, and this was when I was finding out about Bitcoin. And hey, like Bitcoin is open source, and I like open source things, and so I want to also contribute to these different open source stuff. So my first contribution actually was not to Bitcoin; it was to the NixOS project. And NixOS, maybe for those that are not familiar, it's a newer distro for the Linux kernel, and it's primarily based on. Sorry, I have a cold, so I can't speak today.
No, you're
Um,
doing amazing.
it's primarily based on reproducibility, and so it has its own ways of doing things in the Linux world. And the first thing I did was packaging and like lots of packaging for the NixOS and the Nix packages distribution. So that was my first venture, and then since then, I have to learn about these things. I have to I guess the biggest thing that I learned was like open source culture and how maintainers expect contribution from contributors. Like, hey, like commits should be this way, or like we should write comments this way, and like specific projects have their specific ways of dealing with things. And that wasn't so obvious to me when I was doing things on my own. And when you're learning programming, you're just like, hey, like this is this and this is that. It's like, hey, you just do whatever you want. But if you're working together in a group, then the group has specific ways of doing things. And if you really want to contribute and be a part of that group, you have to follow those things. And so, and that's the same for every single project. And I guess that's the thing that I had to sort of learn as I went. And
Yeah.
And but yeah, but now now I can't imagine myself doing something else than like open source contributing.
Would you have advice for someone who wants to get into Bitcoin development in terms of how best to start getting involved?
Um, I always tell people this. It's like maybe it's the same with like ETH or any other project, but I tell them, hey, like, have you used Bitcoin? Like, not on an exchange, but on a wallet. And if you use it on a wallet level, then you sort of see these problems. But I go further. Hey, have you used Bitcoin with your own node? And then that like people usually haven't done that when they ask me how to be a Bitcoin developer. And if you do that, then you find out, oh, there's like tons of these problems. It's not usable for the average person. And one of the things that really got me interested in like performance was when I was starting to run a Bitcoin node. It also took forever. And I was
Mm.
like, hey, like what's going on? This is taking forever. So that's one of the things that I tell people to do when they're really interested. Hey, just use Bitcoin as a power user, and if you use it as a power user, you'll sort of see these problems. And um, once you see a problem, hey, like yeah, then identify that. And I guess the sources that you would use to identify that, I nowadays like ChatGPT and LLMs are really good at like pointing you at the right direction. So once you find something, then you could bug people that work on those things. So like if you work on, I don't mind being bugged on Twitter or DMs. If it's like, if there's a lot of spam in the DMs, but if it's obviously not spammy, then yeah, I'll answer. So like if you specifically want to bug me, then I'm open to it. If you write it out like it's spammy, then yeah, I will obviously ignore it. But yes, but I think that I'm also speaking for my fellow contributors, but I'm pretty sure that they will also be interested in hearing out someone that is genuine.
No,
And
yeah,
once you
yeah,
yeah
that's really good
yeah
advice.
so
And
yeah
especially for someone who might want
sorry yeah go
to
ahead.
contribute to Utreexos, if they're a Utreexo power user and they send you a message with a bunch of details about something that's going wrong or something that they want to fix or help optimize, that's an excellent kind of like foot in the door for
Right.
perhaps getting involved in the project, right?
Yep. Yep. It's like, hey, like this guy looks genuine. Let's like invite him. I don't know. We have these weekly meeting calls. It's like, hey, like come on, and we can talk about these different things. So yeah, like definitely.
Well, one final question for you, as we kind of like wrap up a little bit. Can you talk about for 2026 in a little bit more detail what the next milestones are in for the Utreexo project,
Mm.
as well as any particular milestones or like interesting developments that you're looking forward to in just Bitcoin development at large, be it with core or something else that you're looking forward to this year?
So specifically with the Utreexo project, what I have in mind is I want to finalize the protocol stuff, the P2P protocol stuff. Once we have that finalized, like, so we do implementation first before we write up the spec. So when I say finalize, I mean implementation, have it working, and then write out the spec. Once we have that, then what I really want to focus on is like getting it ready for the average user. So a lot of testing, lots of performance fine tuning that we were ignoring because we're finalizing the spec. And yeah, like just getting it a hands into of the regular user. Um, there's other projects that involve Utreexo that I've like other pet projects that I've been starting. One of the things is, hey, like I want to build this program where if you give it a Bitcoin block and the according like the corresponding Utreexo proof to it, then it spits out, hey, whether this block is valid or not. And this could be really useful for like hardware wallets where it's very little resource. And the idea was, hey, the hardware wallet doesn't know anything about Bitcoin, but what if we just were able to feed it blocks and then it's able to find out, hey, um, like these are specifically the coins that I have that I control, and you're able to be more certain of your like what Bitcoin what UTXOs you control. So those are the things that I'm looking forward to.
Any estimated
Specifically, yeah.
timelines on any of those? Like, be it with the finalizing of the
Mhm.
spec, or be it with the testing, just for the average user, or be it with perhaps the spitting out the block, like that kind of tool, like any estimated
First
timeline?
quarter, finalizing the spec should
Hmm.
happen within first quarter.
Okay.
Tests and performance fine tuning is, of course, does not like it's always a work in progress, but I we should have something really, really good by the end of summer this year. The tiny thing, I'm not sure if I'll if I'll be able to really push that forward. But I'm also hoping to have it this year, but that's a big hope. but but yeah, we'll see. We'll see how quickly I'm able to progress in all of these things. But something that's definitely going to happen is the finalization of the BIP, like this quarter, like that. I am sure of. You know.
And on the kind of just more broader, like Bitcoin development roadmap side, anything you're particularly looking forward to in 2026, or not so much?
I guess a lot of the tension nowadays is in like post quantum stuff, and lots of people are worried about that. Me personally, that doesn't interest me as much. Um, so like other devs are going to do that, and I think you'll see a bunch of progress on those ends as well.
Yeah.
Something that I'm personally interested in is like the cluster and mempool. So it's like with Bitcoin P2P stuff. There's a project called Cluster Mempool, and there's and it specifically has to deal with it specifically deals with the like layer two security. Like we have like of course the Lightning Network, but we have like different protocols like Arc, and like the mempool improvements will uh, help with the security and the usability of these layer two networks. So that's also happening. Um, I guess there is a bit of momentum also in different ways of speeding up Bitcoin, the initial block download or like the block download and processing up until the tip. There's a bit of momentum on that front as well. Um, so yeah, and then there's a bunch of other guys that are working on Bitcoin privacy things. So yeah, so,
I mean, on the
like
front
different
of
projects. Yeah,
on the
go ahead.
front of the initial block downloads, I feel like the benchmarking working group would be something you would like absolutely enjoy, because you enjoy performance, or like
Yeah,
discussing or like thinking about the performance of nodes. I feel like that it would be such a natural kind of like fit for you.
yeah. That is also something that I'm interested in. So we'll see what happens.
Okay, okay, I got you. I mean, after this conversation, I'm really excited to see potentially the adoption of Utreexos and like different tools related to Utreexos that could radically kind of like, or like just significantly, I guess, impact Bitcoin apps and Bitcoin, like you said, hardware wallets. So I hope that I can follow up with you once, uh, yeah, once
Enough time has
users.
passed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the way I think about Bitcoin development is just it's moving at a snail's pace. But look, I mean, I caught you at a good year. I caught you on a good year, where we've got some action happening. Question: do you have time in the last few minutes of this interview to do a quick rapid fire question section with me? This is a section where I'm just hoping you give me like very short one word answers, and it's whatever pops into your head.
Yes. Let's do it.
Okay. Rapid fire question. We're starting now. First one. What do you like most about working on Bitcoin?
Freedom to do what I want.
What do you dislike about working on Bitcoin?
Um, things are slow. Lots of reviews, lots of nitpicking.
What's an area of Bitcoin development that you wish more people would start contributing to, like underserved areas of protocol development?
Wallet interface protocol, like specifically interface to the server.
What do you wish somebody had told you about jumping into becoming a full-time Bitcoin developer that you wish you had knew and like wish you they told you before you got into it?
Internal politics. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to follow up with you about that one,
Okay.
elaborate on another episode.
Okay.
What's something about the way that Bitcoin protocol evolves that you wish more people knew about, or that you think not enough people know?
Um, Lots of fine detail tuning, like lots of work going into making things work and making sure that things work efficiently. Lots and lots of work going into that.
What is the most necessary character trait to become a Bitcoin developer?
Patience.
And finally, if you weren't working on Bitcoin, is there another open source project that you would want to work on? And if so, what is it?
I would take NixOS. I'm probably working on NixOS.
Well, that concludes the rapid fire section. You did
Yeah.
it. You got through it.
Yay.
Thank you so much, Calvin, for the time. It was such a pleasure chatting with you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. I think it went pretty well. I had a really fun time sharing all of my what I'm doing and about the project. Hopefully, it's of benefit to you and the listeners here.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned kind of before we started the recording, you are my first Bitcoin developer guest. Up until now, I've only had Ethereum developer guests, and this is the year that I'm really trying to push for more Bitcoin developers, more Bitcoin developer coverage. So, as the inaugural Bitcoin developer guest, I just want to, yeah, say a
Yes.
special
Thank
thank you
you.
to
Thank
you.
you.
And
Honored
yeah,
to be the first.
yes, 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 and hopefully first of many to come. So yes, I'm going to wrap up the episode here. To all of my listeners who were tuning into this episode of Ready for Merge, this is kind of a special Meet the Devs style interview. Thank you guys for listening. Please be sure to like, subscribe, share the episode if you enjoyed it. Um, and I'm going to be back with a new Ready for Merge podcast episode next week. It'll be a bi weekly brief on Bitcoin and Ethereum protocol development. Until then, I hope everyone has a very good week. And I'll talk to you guys all again shortly. Bye, everyone.